All right, today we're doing a full diagnostic briefing on a really sophisticated form of social power dynamics. Look, we're not just talking about arguments or disagreements here. We're breaking down an engineered system, an architecture, really, that's designed to just dismantle someone's authority from the inside out. And the craziest part? It uses its target's own strengths as the weapon. Let's get into the analysis.
This quote, this gets right to the heart of it. In any high-stakes environment, conflict is almost never about who's right. It's a battle of who loses their cool first. This is what we call the silent tripwire. It's this invisible trap that doesn't attack you head-on. No, it's much smarter than that. It provokes you into a self-defeating reaction. It literally weaponizes your own sense of integrity against you. The goal isn't to win the point. It's to make you disqualify yourself from the game. So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we're going to define the trap itself. Then we'll look at who it targets most often and how they get taken out. After that, we'll actually reverse engineer the hijack, look at the deep psychology that makes it so powerful, and then learn how to spot its signature. And finally, we'll pinpoint the one strategic move that makes the entire system fall apart.
Okay, let's be perfectly clear about something. What we're analyzing here is not just a heated exchange or someone's opinion. Emotional baiting is a calculated sequence. It's a system built by what you could call a reaction architect to figure out the exact setting on your emotional fuse and then to light it on purpose right in front of an audience that's only going to judge the explosion, not the match. And this right here, this is the crucial part. The person setting the trap isn't trying to debate you on logic. They're going after your sovereignty, and they do it by turning your own sense of fairness, your professional pride, your need for the truth against you. They'll drop in a subtle but really profound injustice, a quiet insult, or a flat-out denial of a fact they know is true. It's precision engineered to just bypass your rational mind and hit that primal sense of violation. You feel this overwhelming need to correct the record, and boom, in that moment of passion, you've lost control of the narrative.
So who is the most vulnerable to this kind of trap? Well, let's look at the most common casualty. We've all seen this pattern play out, right? The sudden erasure of a brilliant, high-performing expert. You have someone who's usually the smartest person in the room, and they get hit with these subtle invalidations, these quiet pokes, until they just snap. And in that one moment, all their years of expertise become totally irrelevant. The second that expert reacts, the entire focus of the conflict shifts. It happens instantly. The conversation is no longer about the actual issue, not the data, not the logic, not the truth the expert was trying to defend. It becomes completely and totally about the tone of the person who reacted. The baiter has successfully made the expert's emotional state the new topic, basically devaluing their character and erasing their credibility in one clean shot.
And this leads to a pretty devastating realization for the target. We call it sovereignty atrophy, because the more you try to explain why you reacted, the more unstable and emotional you look to everyone else. Your passion for the truth, your greatest asset, is now being framed as your biggest liability. You've basically just handed the remote control for your own reputation to someone who knew exactly which buttons to push. And now they look like the calm, composed leader, while you look like the problem that needs to be managed.
But how? How is this hijack engineered so well? Okay, now we're going to shift into a full diagnostic breakdown. We're going to reverse engineer this thing, step by step, and reveal the actual blueprint of the reactive loop. This is the moment where sovereignty breaks down, and raw reaction takes over from logic.
The process is actually pretty methodical. First, you have trigger mapping. The baiter does a kind of vulnerability audit. They figure out what you're most proud of, your intelligence, your integrity, your expertise, and they start to subtly question it, just vibrating the pillars of your identity. Second is the limbic strike. They'll say something that is just blatantly false, so wrong that your brand's threat detection system, your amygdala, just can't let it go. It's designed to trigger what neuroscientists call an amygdala hijack, totally bypassing rational thought. Third, and this is key, is performative contrast. As your voice gets louder with righteous anger, theirs gets quieter, filled with fake concern. They create this powerful anchor that paints you as the aggressor and them as the calm victim.
And all of these steps lead to the final stage, attributional monopoly. At this point, the baiter has seized total control of how the situation is framed. The group isn't trying to figure out who's right about the issue anymore. Their focus is now entirely on who is calm. By becoming that stable node, the baiter gets to be the rational adult in the room, while the expert, the one fighting for the truth, is now the emotional problem child who needs to be handled.
This brings us to the most critical question in this whole analysis. Why is this so brutally effective, even when you're dealing with intelligent, data-driven people? The answer isn't in our rational minds. It's in the deep, ancient wiring of our social brains?
To answer that question, we've got to look at the cognitive biases the reaction architect is exploiting. See, this isn't about intellect, it's about the brain's two-track system, the high road of conscious thought versus the low road of raw emotion. And emotional baiting is an attack designed specifically for that low road.
The mechanism here is what we call the heuristic of composure, and it's powered by a mental shortcut called the fundamental attribution error. Our brains are fundamentally wired for survival, right? So they prioritize safety signals over complicated data. When you put these two characters side by side, the brain's status radar instinctively labels the calm person as safe and in control, and the loud, agitated person as a threat. It doesn't even matter what they're saying. Your outburst is processed as a more immediate biological threat to the group's harmony than their quiet lie is.
So what that means is that composure itself is weaponized. The baiter knows that the people watching, who just want things to be stable and easy, are going to take the path of least resistance. They will find a way to blame the reactor, telling themselves, well, there's no excuse for that kind of behavior, because it's way easier than trying to figure out the complex, subtle pokes that led to the explosion in the first place. Quietness gets mistaken for character.
Okay, so we understand the architecture and the psychology. Now let's get into diagnostics. How do you actually recognize this trap when it's happening? The key is to shift out of feeling it and into analyzing it. You have to learn to stop feeling the injustice and start auditing the dynamics of what's unfolded.
Here are the metrics to watch for. Look for what we call the provocation-reaction disconnection, or a provocation-contrast divergence. To an outside observer, the target's explosion seems to come out of absolutely nowhere. The size of their emotional reaction looks completely out of proportion to the tiny little poke that seemed to cause it. That massive disconnect between the stimulus and the response, that is the unmistakable signature of an engineered trap.
And this brings us to the central tragic irony in all of this, the reactor's paradox. The one person who cares the most about the facts, about integrity, about getting it right, has that exact same passion used against them as a tool to paint them as too emotionally volatile to be a reliable source of that very truth. Their greatest strength is systematically turned into their fatal flaw.
So, what's the ultimate insight here? If this system is so good at hijacking our own biology, how do you neutralize it? Well, the solution isn't to win the argument. It's not about explaining why you reacted. The solution is to make the entire system inoperable.
Let that one sink in for a second. Your reaction is the leash. Your predictable anger is the control mechanism. As long as someone else can reliably get an emotional response from you, they effectively control your professional future. So the strategic goal isn't to prove that you're right. The goal is to become unmovable.
And this is the real key. The entire architecture of emotional baiting depends on a captured, predictable limbic reaction. But once you become aware of the mechanics, the trigger mapping, the limbic strike, the performative contrast, you can see the whole sequence for what it is, just an impersonal system. And that awareness, all by itself, is what makes it collapse. You see the hook, and that neurological urge to bite it, it just dissolves.
True sovereignty, true power, is in that tiny little space between their provocation and your response. That gap is where your power is. The diagnostic command is simple. Stop biting the hook. Own the gap. By refusing to react on their terms, by choosing a response instead of just suffering a reaction, you dismantle the entire trap and you reclaim your authority.